and other esteemed guests, thank you so very much for joining us in this very special session brought to you by the Caribbean Studies Association in its 46th annual conference with the theme, Reframing Caribbean Influences on Global Spaces, critically engaging perspectives on human geography and risks, political economy, and technology. Now, before we begin, I would just like to take the opportunity to say what this initiative has been like. It certainly has been a grand one. The CSA Young Scholars Mentoring Program was implemented in 2021 and successfully executed 5 dialogue sessions with young scholars and academics across the world. And so in our very continued pursuit of molding young and brilliant minds, we have extended the mentoring program into this product, the CSA Young Scholars Mentoring Program 2.0, Young Scholars Preparing to Move Ahead. At this time, I just want to say a very special thanks to the amazing sponsor of this session, the Institute of Gender and Development Studies Mona Unit of the University of the West Indies. And so the objective of today's session is simply to bring closure to the 2021-2022 mentoring program, drawing on expert knowledge to assist mentees to chart their own unique ways forward. All right, so just to kind of give you a roadmap as to how we'll be doing this today, our session actually begins with a very special presentation from our guest facilitator, Dr. Karen Carpenter, and you can see her video is already opened. And at the end of her presentation, we will go ahead and open the floor to the audience in case you guys may have questions or concerns that you may want to put forward, okay? And you can always use the chat option for that. So I'm seeing a few participants in about 1 or 2 minutes. Can you just go ahead and enter into the chat box where you're joining us from? Let me see. Anybody? I think you all should have the option for. Okay, all right, no problem. So we'll just go ahead and have our presentation first, as I've mentioned, and then at the end, we'll take questions, okay? So today, we're graced by the presence of Dr. Karen Carpenter, who will be addressing us on the topic, building an academic career. Right? Dr. Karen Carpenter is the head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, Mona Unit. She is a licensed counseling psychologist in Jamaica and a Florida board certified clinical sexologist with a PhD in educational psychology. She is also the director of the Caribbean Sexuality Research Group Free Public CSRG Clinic at the University Hospital of the West Indies. She is the editor of Interweaving Tapestries of Sexuality and Culture, author of Love and Sex, The Basics and Questioning Caribbean Jewish Identity, and co-author of Language, Race, and the Global Jamaican. Dr. Carpenter is the host of Love and Sex on Facebook and YouTube, and she has myriad research interests, including human sexuality, gender, and interpersonal relationships, and psycholinguistics. So, without any further ado, it is with great pleasure that I present to you the illustrious and vibrant Dr. Karen Carpenter.
Thank you for that very lovely introduction, Regan. Illustrious, I'm not sure, but I am excited to be here, and I'm always excited to speak to young scholars because I think it's so important for us to mentor. I think it's so important for us to help others to learn from our own mistakes, not just from what we got right, but what we got wrong. I think it's important to know what not to do. That's very important as well. I'm going to start by asking everyone, as you did, to use the chat. And before we even speak about some of the key elements, and I've kind of tried to make it very visual for people, and I want questions more than anything else. because different people are in different disciplines and are at different stages of their career development as an academic. First thing I want to ask you to do is to write down two things that you want to get out of this small talk. If I know what you want to get out of it, then I can tailor what I have to say to your needs. And then Reagan, who's the moderator, will assist me with knowing what you've put in those little boxes. So we're going to take a minute and just type in 2 items you want to get out of today. And I'm watching that chat box to see if anything is going in there. Yes, I know how to use chat. I'm IT savvy. All right, guys. Let's see who our participants are. Now, I am going to begin, and you can put those questions in as you think of them, because I'd like this to be helpful to you specifically and not too generalized, okay? So I'm going to go on to the next slide, and we're going to have a look at some of the issues that we need to think of. And I'm thinking that one of the first things we have to do is we have to operationalize terms. Now, if you've been doing research, if you've been doing your master's, if you've been doing your PhD, you're probably tired of hearing this term, the operationalizing of terms. But it's very important in academic speak to operationalize what you mean, the word to mean, in the context that you're dealing with. And these are words that we hear all the time, and we think we all know what they mean. Yes? So let me start by clarifying what these words mean. And I'm going to start at the bottom, not at the top. A lecturer, a term we use all the time. Oh, my lecturer, the lecturer, etc., etc. And a lecturer simply means someone who gives lectures. So anyone can be a lecturer. But when we speak in the academic context, we usually mean someone who is lecturing as their job. This is their main job. And it's usually within the context of higher education, tertiary level education. So if you are teaching at a higher level, you're either an assistant lecturer or lecturer, and that's one sort of job. But often I hear people saying, if they're lecturing, that they're a professor. See that thing at the top there? That's not what is meant in our context at the University of the West Indies. And certainly in the United States and in some other universities locally, they use the term professor for anyone who's lecturing. That's not at all what we mean here. So everyone who gives lectures as their job is a lecturer. Next, we have the term scholar. And I like the fact that we use scholar for the topic today. So a scholar is also a reader, if you like, someone who reads widely in a particular specialization and is knowledgeable about a particular specialization. When you come in for your first degree, back in, I used to tell people in ancient days, my students say, way back then, they mean 30 years ago, or a long time ago means 50 years ago. Okay, so way back then and a long time ago, we would say we were reading for a degree. You didn't study a degree, you read for a degree. So you came into the university to read about the area of specialization and to build critical arguments around what you had read and to interact with your lecturers who may or may not be professors. Good? So a scholar is a specialist in a particular area of study, and the term was used particularly for the humanities, but it can be used more widely. Many people think that if they're a lecturer and a scholar, they're an academic. Okay. In common parlance, everyday use, we use that word very loosely. We almost think that everybody who attends a university is an academic. I remember the other day I went to buy some flowers and my flowers man said to me, miss, my daughter, she just get her doctorate at the university, Yes, she's a doctor now. She was there 3 years. And of course, what he means is she has her first degree. right? But to him, anyone who attends a university must be a doctor. So terms are used loosely. An academic is a scholar in a university of higher education, and more appropriately, an academic is often recognized in their field of study by their peers. So what we have to look at there now is, are the peers citing this person? Is this the foremost scholar? So an academic is a scholar who has pursued years of scholarship and is known for their area of scholarship. Being a lecturer does not make you an academic. Being a scholar does not make you an academic. An academic has what I like to call colonized an area of study for which they are known. And people refer to them when speaking of that area of study, okay? And then we have that term professor, which is bandied about a lot. And a professor, of course, is a certain type of academic, a certain type of scholar, and that professor sometimes has a chair, but most often has achieved the highest rank of academic scholarship in their area. Good, they have a body of work. Usually they have at least one. Most professors that I know have several books, but they have at least one original book to their name. And they have other publications, obviously, and other works. So we want to get those right, especially if we're going to stay in academia, which is, again, look at the word I just used, academia, yeah? But it doesn't make you an academic. If you want to stay in academia, you have to use these terms correctly. Okay, so let's look further. Next one, let's see. So if you look at a photo of the staircase above, it looks almost like an eye. It's very complicated. You notice it goes up and up and up. It must be French, eh? It's either French or Russian, right? We know that there are steps in this process, and often we think it's like a maze. We think it's like this circular process where you just keep going and going and going, and you don't know when it's going to stop. And I'm going to ask you to click again for me, Aries. What we would like is for you to have a straightforward step by step by step. We don't want you to get into that French or Russian maze of steps and don't know where you're going. We want you to have a sequential experience that you can measure and you can say, okay, I'm here and I need to go there. I want it to be very clear for you. So how do we navigate these steps? First things first, publications. You know the term publish or perish. So it's very, very important to publish. Yes? Now, while you're publishing, you might start off by publishing as a collaboration. And I encourage publishing even with your peers, because you may not always be lucky to publish with your professors or lecturers or scholars or academics on a campus. But you can get together with your peers and publish. So what you're going to look for is call for papers. You're going to just punch in that term, call for papers. And then perhaps, let's say your area of specialization is geology. So I would put call for papers, geology, and it would tell me which journals are publishing articles on geology. And then I get familiar with them, yes? And you can set it up so they send you their call for papers. Volunteering, very, very important. But this really ought to be an activity that is time-bound. Volunteer to be a researcher, research assistant, unpaid assistant, intern on one of your lecturers' activities that they're doing. You will not get credit for it unless they actually want to write your name into the credits, but you will learn a wealth of information that we can't tell you here. Doing is learning. You're going to learn by doing if you volunteer. Do not volunteer for life. Volunteer for a short period. And I would say straight out of the master's program or straight out of the PhD, volunteer for a year. Give some time to someone else to see how research is conducted in real life. You've been doing research for examinations. That's different from research for publications. Yes, not that different, but different enough. and you want to learn a life cycle of a publication. It has a life cycle, just like the birthing of a child, and it takes about that long. Yes, it's not instant. So I'd say find some person who has a good reputation and volunteer. Try to find research assistantships. Now, those usually go for the life of a project and they're renewed every year. A caution with research assistantships: it's good for earning some money and some experience. Do not get lazy and refuse to publish while you're an assistant, and recognize that a research assistantship is not on the academic path. I'm going to say that again. If you are a research assistant, you are not on the academic path. Your renewal of contract is yearly and according to the project that you're on. Good? And that does not count towards your academic advancement. And we're going to look at that in a little bit when we look at the bottom. Have a strategy. I remember when I just finished my PhD working with a colleague as a research fellow and also volunteering to do work. I was having a conversation with a colleague and he said to me, you know, there are two ways to get ahead in the university. And he meant any university. He said, there's a woman way and a man way. So that made me stop and think. And I asked him what he meant by that. He said, well, the woman way is to be a good girl and just follow what others are doing until you get given some advancement. And the man way is to go after it. I'm leaving you to decide which one you want to do. But I'm going to suggest to you that having a strategy is key. Know the difference between a goal and an objective. Your goal are the big overarching things. I want to make professor one day. I don't like goals like that. I want to make professor one day. An objective would be, I need to have a sole published book, my own book that I publish on my own, along with X number of publications and Y number of grants, et cetera, to get a professorship. And then I chip away at my objectives bit by bit. How you know the difference is a goal is overarching, but an objective is measurable. Yes? So if you can measure it, it's an objective. If you can tick it off the list, it's an objective. Decide what to colonize, because in your area of study, and some people do bench work, medical faculty does bench work, the sciences sometimes do bench work, which means 6 people chop up one study and they write one portion of it. Lab work, yes? Decide which of these bits of information you're going to colonize. What will you call your own? Really make a decision about that. You can't be everywhere at all times and you can't do everything. So what part of this are you going to look at more minutely? As a psychologist, when psychologists finish their PhDs, we immediately think about specialization. That's not even a question. And psychologists never stop studying, incidentally. Anybody who has a medical or paramedical profession studies continuing medical education every single year. And it's a lot of them that we have to study every year. So when you think about what you're going to colonize, think about the lifelong commitment you're making. People say, oh, I want to be a psychologist. Yeah, but do you want to study for the rest of your life? And if you don't, it's not the profession for you. You will not be allowed to never study. Otherwise, you will not be able to be licensed. Yeah? Okay, medicine, psychology, those areas, you need to study every year. Who was here before you? When you look at a piece of land that you want to colonize, is there anyone in our region? Don't think of just Jamaica. Is there anyone in the Caribbean region? And I'm going to ask us Anglophone persons to take off our biases. We're very biased towards English. We say, oh, I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak French, I don't speak Dutch. The Caribbean speaks 4 languages. And Google Translate translates everything these days. So do your due diligence and find out who has been writing in the area that you want to colonize. And then perhaps if they're ahead of you, you might want to volunteer for them. You might want to volunteer to work for them for a year. I've been invited to volunteer to work for people that I didn't think I would have the opportunity to work with. Yes? And sometimes it means you're going to have to bear some expenses and travel abroad, but look into it and look into it in all 4 languages. Okay, and then finally now, administration. Here's where we fall down. Because we're so bookish and we're so into this, book and learning and academic stuff and what have you, we forget that our advancement depends on HR. The Human Resource Management Department of any university, whether here or elsewhere, and I've worked in universities in various countries, the Human Resource Department is critical to your advancement. You need to pay attention to the point on scale. Where are you employed on that step ladder that you see there? In the lecturer band, for instance. How close are you to the bar? Are you above the bar? Are you below the bar? Are you at the bar? I understand that most people didn't think about the bar, and it's not the bar you're thinking of. That's the bar you're going to go to after 5:30. Right now we're talking about pay scale, right? And people don't realize that when you go onto the lecturer scale, there are 12 rungs. It's not lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3. That's not how it works. So go to your HRMD office, send them a note. They recently did a presentation on this, and ask them, where am I on the point on scale? How many rungs are left? And what do I need to do to get to the top rung? And then you have senior lecturer after lecturer, and then professorship. Okay. Career pathways. Every university has a thing called career pathways. And again, that's HRMD. They can tell you, believe it or not, folks, how many points you will score for every single item that you do. If your article is in a peer-reviewed journal, you'll score 1 set of points. If it's not, you'll score another set of points. If it's joint authored, you'll score another set of points. And there are many items on which we can score points depending on your discipline. Those points will move you up on the point on scale. So these 2 things are critical to your future and your career planning. Find out. It's not vulgar to know. It's wise to know. Otherwise, you're not playing chess. You're playing checkers. You're just moving little dots across the board. Let's play chess. Yes, let's forget about the man way and the woman way. Let's just play chess and plan strategically. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, you see that I'm very concerned about time and money and time and progress. Time is literally money, both in your paycheck in terms of advancement, and time is money in terms of the time you waste is going to cost you. Without calculating the time that you want to move ahead in, you cannot measure your progress, right? So decide, how long will you dedicate to achieving each goal? People come in and they say, oh, I'm a lecturer. I want to be a senior lecturer. How are you going to do that when you're just at number 2 on the scale? There are 10 more steps. And if you add up what it takes to go up those 10 steps, you will see that it will take years. So you have to use your time judiciously. So plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead. Be mindful of what work you can actually claim. When we work with people who are the stars in the firmament, when we work alongside colleagues who are senior to us, the professors and others who are senior to us, the scholars, and they invite us to come in and do some work, that's not our work. If you're a research assistant on a project, that's not your work. If you're a volunteer on a project, that's not your work. Some very kind professors will mention their research assistant on something or may offer to publish with their research assistant. Here's the deal, guys. If a senior colleague offers to publish with you or to work or to offer you to give you work on their project, understand that if they ask you to publish with them, you are doing the work. Their name carries enough weight that what they're doing is vetting the paper and ensuring that it gets into a journal. Do not expect them to sit down with you and write the paper. That's not going to happen. You're very fortunate if you have a collegial relationship and you can write together. And I've had both types of relationships, and it was lots of fun to write together. But the fact of the matter is, when you're getting on a project, if your name is going to go on something, expect to do the donkey work and expect the other person to vet it, critique it, and send it back to you and say, no, this is not good enough. That's what their job is. They've already made their name. Okay. Try to publish in peer-reviewed. Please avoid anything that's not peer-reviewed. Publish in peer-reviewed journals and try to find high-impact journals where possible. Not always possible, but you can search and find out what the impact of the journal is. There's a chart that's published every year with the impact of the journal that you're trying to publish in. Try to attract grants, especially if you're moving up the lecturer scale. You've moved from assistant lecturer to lecturer 1, lecturer 2. It's time for you to think about how you're going to attract a grant. Even a small grant shows that you know how to write a grant and how to secure a grant. And that means you understand methodology, budgeting, and putting a proposal together. We have a thing on campus called MORI, M-O-R-I. MORI is there to help you to write those grants. Please go and see them. Many of us think a PhD is the end, the be all and end all to be called doctor. A PhD is just the beginning. I remember 3,000 years ago when Jesus was a boy and I got my driver's license and I was leaving the place so happy. And the instructor said to me, you think you get your license? You know everything about driving now? I said, no, sir. I'm only going to start beginning. He said, oh, I hope you know that's training wheels. PhD is your training wheels. Yes? That's your training wheels. It means that you are free to pursue your own goals now. You're free to colonize somewhere, but it is just the beginning. Don't get complacent. Enjoy it, of course, and, you know, enjoy the win. But don't get complacent and believe that because you have a PhD, everything is sorted. All it means is you've entered the area where everybody has a PhD. When you look left, you look right, everybody have a PhD. Good? So you have to do something more remarkable. Okay, next one. Work-life balance. When I speak to graduate students in the Institute, this is one of the things that I complain about the most. And when I speak to colleagues, this is one of the things that stumps them the most. You gotta have a good work-life balance. There is no point achieving all of this if you're frazzled all the time, and if your family says they don't see you. Nobody's impressed by your PhD at home. I tell people all the time, they don't give me more food. There's no red carpet. I don't hear any trumpets blowing when I come through the driveway. I expected there to be something, you know? Somebody doing a little dance when you enter. No. Having a PhD does not exempt you from balancing the life that you have with your family and friends. And I really need us for good mental health to pay attention to this. So let's have a look at a little exercise that you can do on your own. We're going to see that. All right. So this is called a pie chart exercise. And it's something that I give to clients all the time. And sometimes I might change the areas. If you notice in the top one, the person is trying to build a second pie on top of the first pie. That's cheating. Yeah? If you have to build two pies, you're not in balance. Something has to go. But it would be good for you to take an assessment. Just take a piece of paper, fold it in two, and on that paper, you're going to write on one side. I'm showing you here. Fold it in two like this. And then what you're going to write on one side is my preferred life, you know, my ideal life. What would my pie chart look like if my life was just sublime? It was ideal. Yeah? And then on the other side, my real life. And break up that pie into all the commitments that you have, and you will see where your imbalance is. For me right now, for this month, my imbalance is in exercise. I need more exercise, and I'm feeling it. Good? I think I'm taking care of the other areas. but we have to balance it out. And for those moving from the master's to the PhD, I regret to tell you that the volunteering at church, if you're planning to do a PhD, that has to stop. I am surprised at how many candidates tell me about a large volunteer portfolio they have for church groups and 4-H club and the service clubs, etc. They're wonderful, but you can't do them and do a PhD at the same time because they're unpredictable. You can't plan how much time you're going to need for them. And this is your time. Get it done quickly, get it out of the way. Yeah? So next slide. I want us to begin to plan SMART goals. This is one of the things that I insist on with every candidate I work with. And by the way, it's no small task at this point with my advanced age. I've now coached over 100 master's and PhD candidates, and I have of my own 24 master's and PhD that I have graduated. So I have seen the gamut, and this is in all disciplines. You need SMART goals. They must be specific, they must be measurable, they must be attainable, they must be relevant. I like to say realistic. Different SMART goal techniques will put different words there, but I like to say they must be realistic. That's what relevant means. And they must be time-based. That's my favorite one. It is not a SMART goal or objective if it doesn't have a time bound around it. You can't say you're going to achieve X and we don't know in what time. And that's very important to your career. Know when you're off track by setting your goals. Maybe your goal was unrealistic in the first instance. Maybe you thought you could do it in a short time and you can't. That's okay. Now you know what the problems are, you can adjust. But don't say you've got a goal and you haven't put a time around it. And you don't have to achieve what the other person achieved. Look out for role models. You may know them, you may not know them. Grab their CVs off the web. Look at what they did to achieve what they're achieving. And that can help to guide you. Okay? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I think we should be up to almost our last slide, if I'm not mistaken. There we go. Right. Reward yourselves. Reward, 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 reward. Build in your rewards into your work plan. Don't make your rewards haphazard. And the reason I say this is if we train our minds, if you train your mind to get a reward when you've reached a substantial milestone, it will recognize that if it works, it gets a reward. I used to tease my PhD students, and I think I've stopped teasing them because one day somebody brought me a bottle of wine. I used to tease them and say that when I'm about to mark a PhD, and a PhD is 300 pages, I would pour a glass of wine and put it down. And based on how good the PhD is, I will not touch that glass of wine. And I used to do that as an incentive to write as well. I used to put down a glass of wine, and sometimes I would just put it back in the fridge. But I put it as my reward to tell myself, when you are done, you can have this. And I'll put it back in the fridge. Now, with the PhD candidate, the more wine I drink, the worse the PhD is. You understand me? So if I don't touch the wine, it means you have a very good paper and you're going to get a very good.
I'm not sure if Dr. Carpenter froze or.
Hang on. I just missed that. Are you getting me now?
Yes, but it's still a little fuzzy. Can you speak again, please, Dr. Carpenter?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, yes, it's a little
Is
better.
that
Thank
better?
you. Yes, yes, much better.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. I don't see any questions in the chat. If you have questions, you could let me know.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Carpenter, for your very informative presentation. I think it's important for us to even use the pie chart exercise in our career planning because so many of us, allow our pursuit of our ambitions to just, basically cause us pain, physical and mental pain. So I thought that was very, very important. And I thank you so much for your instructive presentation. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box.
Nor am
However,
I.
I'll just go ahead. I'll go ahead and ask. Oh, well, we do have a comment from Catherine Adams. Thank you. Great points to you, of course, Dr. Carpenter. So we do have some appreciation from persons in the audience. I would just go ahead and ask one question. And that's just because for me, I'm a doctoral student
Yeah.
and I find that a lot of the presentations
Yay.
are, I just hope nobody is drinking wine when it comes on to my paper when I'm there, of course. But I just wanted to I just wanted to know, like, how would we do you have any advice of persons who may not necessarily want to become a lecturer or professor or go into academia, so to speak? Because I think a lot of the times presentations are geared more towards those persons. And I think they're, persons who are pursuing higher learning, masters, doctoral studies, etc. Some may be mixed, some like myself, probably I'm just talking about myself, but, would like to be in academia as well as in the field. Some persons may not want to have
Okay, and
anything
what's
at
your
all.
area, Regan?
Juvenile
What's your area?
justice, juvenile justice, Dr. Carpenter.
Excellent. Okay, so justice, a very practical area.
Right.
Wonderful. In fact, before we started, Regan, as a sidebar, I was thinking about the fact that for instance, people in medicine, paramedical professions like ourselves, in psychology, we have different criteria for promotion than straight academics because clinical hours matter. For you in the judiciary, where you're looking at juvenile matters, etc., you're going to find that you have a great deal of work that might have to do with what used to be called CDA, the CFP, right? And places like the gender board. So what you would want to do is to look at, again, the great World Wide Web, look at aligned professions, to have a conversation with a human rights group. So that's another area. The United Nations is another area, UNFPA, I can think of so many. And I just had a conversation with some colleagues in the United States about the justice system and, intimate partner abuse. And one of the things that I'm proposing is that we have to take a psychojudicial approach to intimate partner abuse. What do I mean by that? Yes, we need the reformative and punitive measures, but if they are done in any kind of isolation of the psychological factors included in intimate partner violence, then we've not cured it. And I think more and more we're breaking down those silos that made the justice system separate of the interconnectedness. So that psychojudicial piece is something they are working on, and we're very excited to hear about. So that's happening in the world, eh? I see a hand. Is
Okay.
it Prof?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
There's a question though, from the chat. I think there's a
Right.
question or a comment about a free fall of jobs in academia and the arts. I think that's what you saw.
Yes. So Neil Joseph, so thank you for your response, Dr.
You're
Carpenter.
welcome.
And Neil Joseph has asked, it seems as though jobs within academia, especially in the humanities, are in a free fall globally. What strategies do you suggest for persons with a PhD in the humanities looking outside of academia?
Okay, so we're thinking practical here, and I love when people leave the university with some transferable skills. I think it's a shame if you do 3 years in a university and when you leave, what you have in your hand can't earn you money. So that's crazy. My suggestion to the person in the humanities, and you may already have done so, is acquire a language. Absolutely acquire another language. Now, you can acquire at a beginner's level several languages, or you can become proficient in a particular language. Why do I say that? So many of the jobs globally and that require a global presence require the knowledge of another language. So, best marketable feature you could have is to understand another language at some level of competence and then translate that into a job placement. Think about, for instance, our Peace Corps volunteers. That's a job that people in the humanities do all the time. Yeah?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Prof. Skolberg.
Hand is up again.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead, Prof. Skolberg.
I think it's your
You're muted.
bandwidth,
Okay.
Prof. Yes, I think it's your bandwidth. There's a little delay sometimes, but we're hearing you clearly. But I like the response you have given a while ago, and I really like that approach in language. In just teaching in this region, I am so shocked by the fact that we have not insisted on a second and third language, having all the Latino aspects around us, and yet we end up with a singular language apart from our local, the language of the heart. That's fine, but I mean, we have lost so much opportunity by just speaking one language. So I appreciate that point. But
and I would say, you know, Prof. Skolberg, that even our language of the heart, let me give you a little tip on that. The Jamaican Language Unit, and this is an advertisement now, right? The Jamaican Language Unit will teach you to write Jamaican in a standardized form. So even if all you speak is the language of the heart, my suggestion to you is go and learn how to write it. Why? Our language is being exported in our lyrics. And there's another avenue for people in the arts if you can translate from one end to the next. And now I have been insisting for many years that when my scholars come in and they do that PhD and they want to represent the Jamaican language and they use a chaka-chaka system, I tell them, no, don't do that. This language has a system too. Learn to translate your own language. We speak a language we do not write, and we write a language we do not speak. We must give dignity to the Jamaican language. So learn to write your own language. It takes 45 minutes for a basic class, and you can learn it in the Jamaican Language Unit. They'll teach you.
I wondered, Prof, if the question that was asked, what do you do with a PhD if you're not interested in going into university teaching? Because that's what I call it, university teaching.
Yes, yes.
And I have been told from the very beginning, see, I'm a teacher by training. So I am in that realm, and I'm from a family of teachers. And so that was in me. I've demonstrated that kind of talent from I was young. But I have been told that if you're not interested in pursuing research or teaching at a university level, then you really should not spend your time doing a PhD, you know, because you're not paid more beyond the master's.
Okay. And that is a very valid response, particularly in countries, for instance, as you and I know, for like Britain and the USA. In the UK, you do not do a PhD unless you intend to teach at some level or research. And I would have said that the other avenue for a PhD is to be a consultant researcher. I'm a consultant researcher. I've been one for, oh my goodness, almost 30 years. Yes. But if you are not prepared to do the hard work involved in research or the tedious work involved in teaching, then a PhD is really not of benefit for you unless you want to do it for the vainglory of it. Some people want personal satisfaction. Yeah. Then you do a vanity PhD and you accept that it's not going to have any utility for you. But it really is the highest level of learning to teach. And the other side, research, because teaching and research go hand in hand. I totally agree with you. I don't recommend people spend their time or money on it unless this is what you intend. I mean, the aligned professions, yes. Aid agencies, yes, but you're going to end up in some kind of research.
Yeah. And Fortune 500 companies.
Don't.
Listen, hello, excuse me, nobody cares. You just have to be competent at what you're doing.
Yes.
So those
Yes.
of you who are thinking, because I know people are in the group that are thinking about moving on, be very clear about what you're doing.
About what it will bring you.
Title is one thing, but the title, brother, but the title are hungry.
The title is meaningless if you're not able to use it to your benefit. It really is meaningless. It's a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of money spent, you know? So be judicious, make strategic moves. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your responses, Dr. Carpenter and Professor Skolberg. And just if I might add quickly, until I'm not sure if anyone else wants to raise another question, there's sometimes, you know, persons may think, you know, I don't want to teach, I don't want to go into university teaching, but then at the same time find that whatever area they find themselves in, they have to go back to research. So it becomes very complementary to, you know, a lot, you know, as we go on with career planning and so on. But thank you so much for your responses. I hope that answered your question, those. Who was it that asked? It was Neil. Joseph, I hope your question was answered. So we probably just...
And I would add to that, Regan, I would add just a little bit more to that. If you're floundering, Prof. Skolberg talked about, you know, some people aspiring to doing a PhD, but they're not really sure why they're doing it. If you're floundering, take a little time and get some career advice. Take a little time and step back for a bit, do a personality test, get someone who can advise very well on how well suited what you're going after is for what you want to achieve. So speak to a bigger head, as them say. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I guess, you know, even more value attaching to the CSA Young Scholars Mentoring Program, because, you know, mentees are paired with persons who can guide them and who are guiding them. So that's a great point. Thank you. We have one. Okay, so John responded to say, yes, thanks for your responses.
You're welcome. And I hope I've made up some time for you. I know how these conferences can be, where we run over or we have a glitch and then we're lost for time and we're like counting the hours, but I hope I've made up some time for you so that people can have a chance to join the next session.
Okay. So you can wrap up because I don't think you have any more questions.
Yes.
No, so no more questions. But thank you again, Dr. Carpenter. Thank you so very much for taking the time to address us today. As I've mentioned, your presentation was very instructive, and I know we all will be using your tips, especially that pie chart exercise, you know, because we have to remain sane. But thank you so much. And I do.
That's the most important part.
Yes.
Blessings. Thank you for having me. Have a good rest of your conference.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Regan. See you soon. I see some of my mentees there.
Okay, so
Okay.
thank you too.
All
Bye.
right.